Welcome, everyone. Hi and welcome. This is the fourth edition of this 6 month long internship that all of us are doing. And my topic for this month is, as you can see, rural cultural food tourism. Basically, I think in my previous three presentations, I made it quite clear that I was living in Greece for more than 2 years. I was doing a master's, and then I stayed back on the island of Crete for a year, and I was doing a dissertation on a food product, the carob. And through my experience of living on an island which is not just very food driven, but it also has a lot of a very rich cultural heritage, culinary heritage. But also the fact that while I was in Bangladesh before that, I was working in a lot of ecotourism projects where we mainly dealt with a lot of, cultural tourism as well. And of course, culinary tourism is a very major part of that. Because whenever you want to showcase culture, and if people are coming to a certain area and they'll be staying there for a few days, they have to eat something. So the food is also part of the whole presentation. And in countries like Bangladesh and Greece specifically, because these are the two countries that I'll mainly be focusing on, countries like Greece and Bangladesh, where food culture or the way that we present food is very very intrinsic to our culture, in the sense that we love being hosts, we love having people over, we love giving our guests the best that we can possibly give. So if you come to someone's house in Bangladesh, and if it's you can be anyone, as long as you're a guest. If you come to the house, the whole kitchen, the entire fridge, whatever is inside is all yours. You can ask for anything, and if it's in the house, if it's readily available, you can have it. So there's a very there's a lot of warmth that's given out to the guests. And so, moving along, when we talk about food as cultural heritage, or food as any kind of, sort of contributor to culture, one of the things that we have to remember is that UNESCO also recognizes food as intangible cultural heritage. The ingredients, of course, are tangible. The food itself, I'm sorry, is tangible, but you know, um, the intangible aspects remain: the smell, the sight, the taste of the food. So together, food itself is considered cultural heritage, and this is something which is very interesting because a lot of people don't look at it like that, and only when they come to a country, and only when they experience something which has which a food which is very food which is very very insightful to how people live, only then do they actually appreciate how food is actually cultural heritage. um, on the same lines, food actually, because we're not talking about something which is a little more tangible regarding food, which is food museums. So food has over the years become such an integral part of tourism that we have food museums all over the world. And one of these museums is this really interesting one, which I have always wanted to go to. And even when I was in New York, I couldn't I couldn't muster the courage to have enough money to go there. Was this amazing museum of food and sorry, I'm so sorry. What is it called actually? Museum of Food and Drink, MoFad, which was in New York. And this whole museum has all these exhibitions. So like the current exhibition would probably have like chow, making of Chinese American restaurant. Like it has some very interesting exhibitions. That it has, obviously it has food that you can go and try, but the whole idea is to basically showcase food in a museum. And there's a bread museum in Germany, this one. Then there's a Chinese museum in Hangzhou. I'm not no. I'm sorry, I really don't know how to pronounce this word. But China has a museum on food. And most of these museums basically have ongoing exhibitions. They bring in new stuff, they showcase their culinary heritage, to the best of their abilities. And again, of course, other than food being showcased in museums, you have food festivals all over the world. And the top picture shows the festival where the one that I attended, because this was on Carob. So this is a small place in Crete, Elunda, where this festival is held every year. And, everyone is invited. A lot of foreigners don't know about it because it's not very well publicized. Um, but still, a lot of internal, a lot of internal tourism happens because people go there and they know that they'll get something delicious to eat. And the picture below this is from Bangladesh. This plate is a plate full of pita. Pita is a local kind of it's like a pancake. You can see that some of it might look familiar to you because they're shaped like, pancakes or flowers. But all of it is mainly made by rice flour. Rice flour with some milk, or rice flour with some jaggery in it, or milk products or something. So we have like a huge collection of these pancakes, which are basically which we start eating in the winter. So November onwards is the pita season because it starts getting colder. So it's the stuff has, you need to eat it when it's hot, like absolutely steaming hot. And so this festival will start next month at some point. Um, Food, on the other hand, like as I mentioned before, is very insightful. Now, these two pictures that I'm showing here are again pictures from Crete, my experience of living there. And I was living in a village called Gonies. And this village was basically because it's in the mountains, so it's far from the sea. These people are not used to eating fish. Can you think of a Greek that's not used to eating fish? I mean, I thought they were joking with me or something, but it's true. And as you can see that there's a lot of meat here because these people are mainly shepherds. They have sheep, goats, they deal with all the products of the sheep or the goat, like the milk, the cheese. They sell the meat. So um, it's all very meat based. And the top picture is this is probably 3 a.m. in the morning because these locals were all because we were foreigners. I was This was a summer school, so a lot of foreigners were there, and so they thought, okay, how can we entertain them? Fine. So at 12 o'clock at night, they would call us, and they'd be cooking a lot of meat. So there was mutton and being cooked on one side, goat meat, and then they would start singing. And when you start singing, dancing has to follow because this is Greece. So singing and dancing accompanied by food and raki, which is the local alcohol. And, that was their way of entertaining us. But the whole thing revolved around the food, because if the food is not there, then there's nothing they can do. They have to eat. So it was interesting for me because I saw how they drank the raki because there's a round of raki shots that everybody has to go through. I don't drink alcohol, but just to be a part of the group and just not to offend them, I had to pretend I was taking a sip. And it was interesting for me because I didn't want to be rude. And they also realized that, okay, she's not used to drinking alcohol, so let's not be. I mean, they were trying to be nice to me, but they still made me had like an entire small shot. But according to them, that was them being nice. So it was, and then how they start to like as the night progresses, they become louder and they become more boisterous, and that's really the essence of the Greek living in these parts of Greece, where even like a city bred Greek is very boisterous, but in the villages they're even more boisterous, and especially at night, right? But it's a very Greek thing, and it just shows you how fond of like good times these people are. um so the thing is that, like I said, this concept of sea and sand in Greece, so when you're going to Greece, you know that you probably know they eat a lot of meat. You've probably come across a Greek that eats a lot of meat, and you think, fine, that's all right. I will also eat meat. But when you go to Crete, you go to a village in Crete, like up in the mountains, you order some food in the restaurants. There are many cafes that don't actually sell fish. There is a big possibility that up in the mountains, when you go on you're doing a tour, you're going to the caves, you're going to all the interesting sites, you stop at a cafe, they don't have fish, they just have meat. And that might be quite surprising to some people because they might think, hey, I've come to Greece, I want to eat fish, I want to eat octopus, because we've all seen people on TV, smashing those octopus on, their heads on the rocks in order to, kill them before they cook them. So we think that's what all the Greeks do. We just don't realize that Greece has this immense diversity of land. So, like specifically like the northern parts of Greece, They don't eat a lot of fish because they are far from the sea. It's mountain region, so they don't have fish there. So a lot of these preconceived ideas that people might have of a country like Greece, which is very famous, um, you know, they there is a bit of a cultural shock, perhaps, let's say a culinary shock to some people, which is, of course, that's a good thing because people need to understand that Greece is not just what you think it is. It has a lot more to offer, which is great. And I think that this is something that they can completely this is something that they take advantage of because they love showcasing their culinary heritage, and they have a lot of it. So they have a lot where it's coming from. And so in terms of a country like Bangladesh, for instance, um, so I'm just going to write the title since there's no title here, and that's really terrible. But for Bangladesh, for instance, you have this top picture here shows chui jhal, which is an ingredient called piper chaba, and this is like a woody stem. It's an ingredient that is found only in the southwestern part of Bangladesh. And honestly, like when I say that people in other parts of Bangladesh don't know about it, you better believe me, because even though we're a really small country, it's the largest delta on the planet. We honestly don't know. A lot of people that do not come from that region don't have never heard of chui jhal, and it's a bit of a spicy sort of an ingredient. So you put it in meat, you cook it with meat, and it needs to be cooked a lot because, as you can imagine, it's a woody stem. But it's very interesting when you cook it because it gives a lovely flavor to the food. And on the picture below it is just regular fish, which we're the largest delta, so we have hundreds of varieties of fish. And um, people coming into Bangladesh expect fish, I understand. Of course, they don't expect meat, or they don't expect all these interesting ingredients which are actually not found in any other countries of this region, because we're right next to India. We've got Myanmar on one side, we've got Nepal above us. Um, so people might think that Bangladesh, being surrounded by all these larger, more, famous countries in terms of tourism, might not have much to offer in terms of its culinary heritage. But then Bangladesh has some really amazing stuff which even a lot of locals don't know about, which means they're not discovered, which means that this is a huge advantage that we have because, Bangladesh tourism can actually focus on these rare, rare things that we have. So, in this short presentation, I think the only thing that I can probably correctly point out is how Greece, being a country which has, a well-known tourist image, tourism image in the world, still can has the capacity to surprise its visitors when they go to places where they don't have the kind of food that that they're used to hearing about, or they go to parts of Greece where they find different kinds of cheeses, because the only Greek cheese that we've ever heard of is feta, and you're not used to hearing of Mizithra, for instance, or the other Cretan varieties that they have. Or the fact that Greece actually doesn't have a huge, they have wine tourism for sure because there's a lot of grapevines growing all over the country, but it cannot compete with the kind of diversity that you might find in Italy or Spain. It doesn't have that kind of variety. So people going to Greece will again be either disappointed or pleasantly surprised when they realize that its wine collection is not as diverse, whereas its diversity in meat dishes or cheeses is far more diverse than they thought. So it is a learning process for everyone when they go to a country, a learning process that is acquired through the food that they eat and the experience of eating that food, just as it would be in Bangladesh. So even in like, for instance, the fact that Greece has this culinary heritage, Greece also really promotes it because for them, for Greeks, culinary tourism, it's very streamlined. So even in, like, I'll show you a small example. There is this advertisement which is one of my favorites actually. It's about this gentleman who's basically, he's gone to Crete and he's arrived and he's being welcomed by the locals. So there you see that they're promoting the food, they're promoting how, there's a term that they use, philoxenia, which basically means, it kind of roughly translate into you how eager your host is to host you, how eager your host is to feed you, to make sure that you've eaten enough. And the same would apply for Bangladesh, in fact, because, we have the same culture. And, so even though like uh, Greece has a streamlined culinary tourism or heritage, Bangladesh does not have such a streamlined, heritage, but both countries have a lot to offer. Both countries have a lot of diversity. And in terms of Greece, for instance, maybe they can look towards sustainability now that they have reached a stage where they have a streamlined, you know, culinary tourism line. But they need to now go for sustainability because a lot of visitors come. The footfall is immense. So they need to start looking at how they can, still continue fishing sustainably or supplying produce which is sustainably acquired. In Bangladesh, for instance, it would be nicer to have a little more promotion regarding the food, a little more training perhaps in rural areas where people might go. Of course, this all has to tie in with the fact that tourism generally in Bangladesh is not as popular as in some other countries, neighboring countries. So culinary tourism can only happen when tourism in its entirety is, at a certain stage. Thank you very much and have a wonderful week.